Today, we are diving into A.C. Ward's incredible analysis of the 20th century. We're going to deconstruct how, in just 50 short years, the entire mindset of England was completely turned on its head. It's this wild story of unbelievable technological progress happening right alongside a deep, profound spiritual collapse.
Ward really sets the stage with this quote right here. I mean, think about that. He's saying that the change in the first half of the 20th century was more intense, more earth-shattering than maybe the last 1,000 years combined. This isn't just about new gadgets. It's about a total rewiring of what it meant to be human.
And this really gets to the heart of the great contradiction of the time. On one hand, you've got these breathtaking leaps in science, cars, airplanes, even splitting the atom. But on the other hand, you see this massive spiritual and moral freefall. 2 world wars, the loss of any kind of moral compass. It's like society gained all this power but had no idea what to do with it. It was losing its soul.
So, to really get a handle on this earthquake of a century, you first have to understand the ground it shook. Let's take a step back to the world before all the chaos, to the Victorian era. For the people living then, their world felt like a house built on solid, unshakable rock.
So, what exactly was this Victorian mindset? Well, it was a culture of total acceptance, a deep, persistent belief in authority with a capital A. It didn't matter if it was the church, the government, or the head of the family. The default setting was always to agree, to confirm, not to rock the boat. You just didn't question things.
And here, you can see the 4 giant pillars holding that whole world up: the home, the Constitution, the empire, and the Christian religion. Now, these weren't just ideas or institutions to the Victorians. No, they saw them as eternal, absolute truths, the very foundation of a civilization they believed would last forever.
But, of course, that rock didn't last. A brand new way of thinking started to bubble up, a spirit that was not at all content with just accepting things. It wanted to question, it wanted to examine, it wanted to test everything.
This line from George Bernard Shaw's play just perfectly captures that feeling. I mean, can you imagine? Everything you thought was permanent, everything you believed in, suddenly just starts to crumble right under your feet. It's this feeling of complete and utter disorientation, like the whole world is shifting.
And who was one of the guys swinging the sledgehammer at that old rock? Well, it was the playwright George Bernard Shaw himself. His whole creed, his motto, was simple: question, examine, test. He basically argued that every belief you hold, whether it's religious or scientific, is just a superstition until you've tested it for yourself.
And this idea was powerful. It wasn't just for intellectuals. This interrogative habit of mind, as Ward calls it, spread like wildfire. It gave ordinary people permission to challenge the so-called experts, to ask why, and to demand that old, dusty prejudices be thrown out like old machines. The age of just nodding along was officially over.
Now, this new spirit of questioning created a massive split, a huge schism in the culture, and you could see it nowhere more clearly than in the world of literature. It basically ripped it right in two, creating these warring camps with totally different ideas about what art was even for.
So, on one side, you had writers like Shaw and H.G. Wells. They were socialists, and they believed in art for life's sake. They wrote for everybody, for the common reader, because they wanted their work to actually change society. But then, on the other side, you had the modernists. Think James Joyce and T.S. Eliot. Their motto was art for art's sake. They wrote really complex, difficult stuff for a small, intellectual crowd, and frankly, they couldn't care less about the common reader.
The year 1922 was a huge turning point. That's when Joyce's Ulysses and Eliot's The Wasteland came out. And according to Ward, this is the moment when high-minded literature basically locked itself away in an intellectual fortress, becoming deliberately hard to understand, almost as if to keep the average person out.
So, with the old Victorian world shattered into a million pieces and high culture hiding away, a totally new world order started to take shape, the age of the masses.
And the big, optimistic slogan you heard everywhere was that this was going to be the century of the common man. You know, the idea was that the average person, the little guy, would finally be the focus of society. But Ward throws some cold water on that idea. He asks a pretty sharp question. Did this new world really lift up the individual? Or did it just create what he calls mass man, an anonymous face in the crowd, a cog in a giant machine, treated more like a statistic than an actual person?
And these were the signs of the times. You had the welfare state, which, for all the good it did, often just treated people like numbers on a form. Mass production meant the pride of individual skill and craftsmanship started to die out, and a whole new consumer culture popped up, a world that cared more about cheap and disposable stuff than about quality or style.
And for Ward, modern advertising was the perfect symbol of this new mass mindset. The whole point wasn't to tell you about a product, it was to manipulate you. The method was simple. Bypass your brain, go straight for your gut, and create an automatic emotional reaction. Link some random product to your deepest desires, love, sex, power, and forget about whether the product is any good. All that mattered was the sale. So, where did all this end up? Well, in his final take, Ward paints a pretty grim picture of a culture in decay, a society that he saw as defined by rebellion, a contempt for absolutely everything, and what he called a new kind of barbarism. By the middle of the century, you had this massive revolt of youth. The rise of the beatniks, who just rejected everything, from jobs and hygiene to traditional morals, was a pretty clear sign of a widespread contempt for any kind of authority or established order. And this brings us back to our friend Shaw, who once argued that good manners are basically the glue that holds society together. Ward contrasts that idea with what he called the barbaric loutishness of the new anti-heroes of the 1950s. For them, being rude was a badge of honor. It was a sign that you were real in a world you thought was phony.
And even something as highbrow as satire wasn't safe. It used to be this powerful tool for critiquing society, right? But it got dumbed down, turned into just cheap ridicule for a quick laugh. It wasn't about making a smart point anymore. It was just about making fun of someone.
Which brings us to the final, really challenging question at the very heart of Ward's entire analysis. The 20th century successfully tore down that old Victorian world, with all its rules and all its certainties. But was the chaotic, mass-produced, and spiritually confused society that replaced it, was that really progress? It's a question that really forces you to stop and think about what that word, progress, even means.